10. Amir. He'd been missing for 3 days, so I came to the only reasonable conclusion. A gap opened up inside me, a piece that I'd always assumed belonged to me but was actually part of him all along. A secret between us, one that even I didn't know about. He was beyond family. I couldn't imagine another body, another choked heartbeat, or strange, slow smile filling that gap. No other arm could ever fully engulf me and choke out the rest of the earth's hurt. I started making plans to kill myself. I didn't want to make a mess, so razors and guns were out. Mom would never forgive me if I used a rope. Eventually I decided to OD out in Blood Swamp, because I knew a spot that'd be lonely and special enough to suit it, and Mom wouldn't have to search very far to find me. Switchingoff.net said that 30 or more milligrams of Xanax would be enough, and it'd be gentle. I didn't have Kai's number, so I just dropped by, because what's he going to do? His door was already open a crack. I rapped hard on the frame. "Yo, Kai." No response. I nudged the door open all the way and stepped inside. It looked like a robbery, the furniture and cabinets all torn apart, but the drugs were still there. Bags of weed, yellow-gray powder, and half-full pill bottles strewn over the couch and floor. "Yo, Kai." Just empty. So I rummaged through the pill bottles until I found a bunch of 2 milligram Xanax and booked out of there. 3 weeks later, they'd found Kai's body washed up on a riverbank with his wrist slit. They said he'd been dead 2 days. They found a note in his back pocket, but the ink had been washed away. Jill. Robbie Fleischer came up beside me at lunch and put his arm around my shoulder. "If you need anything, you can count on me." He left it there for the rest of lunch. I didn't make him stop. I didn't know what he would have done if I had tried. Lou. I DM'd young Caligula, but he never wrote back. He'd stopped posting altogether. I asked about the Tyler picture and any other details about his suicide, but the mod said it still wasn't confirmed. I still hadn't told Jill. Amir. I wrote out my note on a piece of lined paper. In it, I told Mom not to blame herself. I told Tasha not to follow me, that she was going to grow up into something incredible someday. I told Marlon I'd miss him, and Tyler that I loved him, and I wrote out a secret I'll never share with anyone. I put on my cleanest shirt and jeans and put the note in my back pocket. Once Mom and Tasha were asleep, I slipped downstairs and out of the back door. The night was hot and fleshy, humming with cicadas and peepers. Foul, soupy winds torn through branches and over the grass and weeds. The moon hung low, full and rust-colored. Animals cried from the outskirts. The backyard descended into a gradual ravine to the swamp. I slid down on wet brown leaves, grasping the trunks of skinny young trees for support until I hit damp ground. The bog opened up into void. I walked through the dark, hopping over small veiny streams, the muddy earth sucking at my feet with each step. I trudged through the brush and scaled rotten fallen trees until I was sure I'd reached the place. An oval rock beside a muddy, stagnant pool. A place that years before I'd made sacred and terrible. I leaned my ass onto the rock and lit up a cigarette, fidgeted with the pill bottle in my pocket, gave myself one last long cry, for the first time since I was little. Lou. I closed my eyes. The bullets perforate my organs. The compactor smashes me flat. The horse pulls me to pieces. I can feel it in the ground, the way trees predict rainfalls and ice storms. It sucks at the earth, eating its way back to the surface. Jill. My body's beneath the sea. My body's beneath the swamp. His face in the ocean floor. His face is the sun, past the lily pads and skim of stagnant water. I keep reaching toward his face, but when I touch him, he isn't there anymore. Amir. I took my time eating the first bars. No need to rush, letting the warm numb push out from my chest to the extremities, feeling my heart slow, feeling the space between beats. Then I'd eat another. Whoa. It was behind me, deeper in the bog, a sound like a dying owl. Woo, woo, like a low bell. I stood up and turned, wobbly, the Xanax trying to pull me to the ground. There was movement in the dark. I pulled out my phone and tapped on the flashlight. I waved the beam over the tree trunks and something else, a pale figure. It was him, naked like a ghost, just a single sock on his right foot, skin all pale gray yellow, his whole frame shaking. Tyler? What? He said. I staggered toward him, my feet slushing through puddles, and streams. As I got closer, I could see the fresh cuts curling all over Tyler's arms, chest, thighs, and crotch. A ring of purple rope burns embedded in his neck. He stared right through me. What? I reached him and bawled, leaned in close, and tossed my arms around him. He didn't even flinch. I tried to ask what happened. All he'd say was, "What?" I took him by the wrists and pulled him through the mud and puddles, dragging him up the ravine to my backyard. He fell to the grass, convulsing. I screamed for help, screaming until it felt like my throat would come apart. First, our neighbor came out, then Mom, then Tasha. Lou. Dad got home from work just as I'd finished breakfast. He took me aside. Jill's boyfriend came through the ER last night. He's pretty banged up, but he's stable. My insides blurred all wrong. I'm not sure Jill knows yet. Can you tell her when you see her today? I nodded. It didn't make sense. He was dead. I saw him. I couldn't understand why Dad would say he was alive. I found Jill in the hall between the first and second period, her face all red-gray, brackish, an old dog. I still don't know what to tell her. Hi. Her mouth opened, her teeth pressed together, the skin on her face pulled back tight. Her eyelids closed and water pushed out. She walked away toward the bathroom. I opened my phone, pressed its buttons into a sentence, and pressed send. I'm sorry. Jill. Each day was broken. On Monday, Mom and Dad said I couldn't miss any more school, so it was my unwashed body and unbrushed teeth and the clothes I'd tried to sleep in, and Mom dropping me off before work because I'd missed the bus, and 3 Ativans this time, maybe a 4th when I got inside. Almost enough to shut me down, but I still cracked when Lou tried talking to me, less because of Tyler, but more because I just couldn't summon the ability to be something for her to aspire to. In English, they discussed a story about a man going crazy and burying his sister in the dungeon of his castle. In algebra, they talked about all the ways numbers come together and split apart. At lunch, everyone just talked, and the next hours were just sounds that didn't mean anything, sputtering from mouths that didn't need to be there. Then school was over, and none of it had mattered. I walked out to the bus. A man called my name. I turned and saw Lou's dad, with Lou walking close behind him. He waved his hand. I almost pretended like I didn't see them, but they were too close for me to get away. Hey, Jill, Lou's dad called. They reached me. Lou's dad said that Lou was supposed to tell me something. Then he told me that Tyler was at the hospital. He was alive. I may have grinned. I can't be sure. I was so happy I could have wrapped my fingers around Lou's face and snapped it apart right there. But instead, I swung around the side of the bus and started running. Amir. Mom let me stay with Tyler through the night. I ate my suicide note in the hospital bathroom. I slept in the chair beside his cot, listening to the machines do the breathing for him. His mom didn't get there until 7 a.m. I woke to her heels clicking off the linoleum, a nurse by her side, saying something about pneumonia, but the rest I couldn't really understand. She stood over his cot, stiff, gripping the side till her knuckles went white. "Tyler, it's Mommy," she said, each syllable monotone, like she held back some tremendous rage. "Tyler, it's Mommy." "Yeah, he might be able to hear you," the nurse said, "or maybe not. It's sort of impossible to know for sure." "I need to go," she said, directed toward no one, and she left, her heels clicking back off into the hall. I went down to the cafeteria to nab some breakfast, but didn't have enough cash for real food, so I hit the vending machines instead. Pepperoni pizza combos and a pair of Reese's cup. I ate a bar and the snacks and played a weird game about vampires on my phone for like half an hour, then went back upstairs, past crying folks and an old woman with a red-soaked patch over her eye, giggling in the wheelchair. Jill. He looked half erased. The nurse said to let her know if I needed anything and left. Everything was just Tyler's swimming empty eyes and broken body and ugly mechanical breaths. I couldn't bring myself to touch him. You don't need to be here, Amir leaned in the doorway behind me. I want to be here, I said. He won't wake for another day or two. Then why are you here? He stepped further into the room, but could barely look at me. He came to me, not you, so you don't need to be here. I stepped in front of him, made him look at me. I have every right to be here. Right. Just go ahead and fucking take it. Take everything from me. Tyler gurgled wet behind me and screamed. He screamed through the tube down his throat, rasping up from his saturated lungs. His eyes were live now. He grabbed at the tube, began pulling it out of his throat, slicked with black and red mucus. He screamed and screamed. The nurse pushed past us with two others. They held him down while the nurse pulled the rest of the tube out. She popped the blue plastic tip off a syringe and pushed the needle into his arm. She went, shh, shh, and he whimpered, no, 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 until he fell asleep. Lou. I texted her every day. Hi. Or, I'm sorry again. She didn't reply. Amir. When Mom caught wind that I'd been cutting class to go to the hospital, she fixed that real quick. Started dropping me off at school herself, even though it made her late for work. I'd still ditch class early some days and head up there. Sometimes I'd be about to enter the room and see Jill already there, so I'd just leave and fuck around until it was time to go back home. Jill. He was still out of it and could barely speak, but each day he seemed a little more like himself. Once, he touched my hand and slurred, I shouldn't have gone into the woods. I know, I whispered. He rolled his head forward. I'm still out there. His eyes narrow slits. You're here. Slowly, he smiled and opened his eyes wider. No, I'm out there. Amir. He got out of the hospital and we got dead drunk in his basement, and I asked what really happened out there. That stays out there. Okay. His eyes changed. Something wants us gone. I didn't say anything. They used to want me gone, but I gave them something. I know how they talk. Who? They want to dream they're here again. He began crying. I saw my dad. I can see my dad. He tried to stand but tipped over. I got up, woozy on my own feet, put his arms around my shoulder, and guided him to the gross couch. I laid him down on his stomach so he wouldn't choke if he puked. When he closed his eyes, I peeked beneath the couch. All his notes were gone. Jill. His hair turned to straw and dandruff, flakes and blackheads like little mushrooms cloudy on his skin. His posture changed, the way he moved and spoke. Over the phone, it'd be like talking to a stranger. We'd hang up and I'd cry with my face hard in a pillow so no one would hear. 11. Lou. There was a rash of animal attacks. Norman Ledger was gored and trampled by a buck. A fourth grader had her arms broken by a flock of geese in Morris Park. A pack of raccoons killed a toddler 2 houses down from mine. Amir. Sometimes Tyler would space out and say things like, see that? And that would be it. He'd stretch a finger out in front of his face, at the empty space before a wall or a chair, and he'd say, do you see that? I see a lot of things, forcing a laugh. He'd look over and stare me in the eyes. Do you see me? Quivering pupils and lips. Yeah, of course. Jill. Kennedy had a boyfriend now, said his name was Bobby. I asked if I knew him, and she shook her head. He doesn't go to school. I'm going to his place later. Come meet him. I don't know. I'll give you weed. Okay. She drove me up past downtown into Highlands. A wall of trees divided the rich parts from the rest of the town, like a castle gate. The only way in through was a tunnel of elm trees. On the other side were rows of identical white houses along the hills, photocopies, clones. We pulled into a driveway behind a fat red SUV, its rear covered in stickers. Jolly Rogers, Don't Tread on Me's, Stars and Bars. Kennedy, I said. It's cool. He acts all tough, but he's a big teddy bear. We stepped up onto the porch and she rang the doorbell. The door opened. A white man, probably in his 30s, with tattoos all over his arm, neck, and face, triangles and V's and crisscrossed lines like broken snakes, and words like crooked and gothed lettering. He leaned forward, smiling with his hand out. "Hi, I'm Crazy Bob." Lou. A bear broke into a house and killed a mother and daughter. A coy dog pulled a baby out of a stroller in a snug morning sun. Dad told Mom he had 11 patients being treated for parasites. Amir. He told me the planet had nerve endings, sprawled out toward stars they'd never touch. He told me that when he breathed, the earth felt it, and when the earth breathed, sometimes he could feel it too. He told me he wished his mother had miscarried. Jill. The living room was like an inversion of the house's pristine exterior. Towers of pizza boxes and Chinese takeout cartons. Black plastic trash bags tossed onto the corner. A gray film of ash and dust over beautiful hardwood floors. The couch looked new but was already punctured with cigarette burns. I sat on its arm, next to Kennedy. Crazy Bob sat beside her with an arm around her shoulder, sprinkling purple-gray leaves into a blunt. He rolled it up with one hand and raised it to his lips, licking it sealed. A guy he called Chucky sat on the other end, a controller in his hands, slashing at witch creatures on the TV. Crazy Bob lit the blunt, took a hit, and passed it to Kennedy. She inhaled and coughed hard. "You smoking?" Crazy Bob asked. Kennedy elbowed my thigh. I shook my head. "It's good shit," he smiled back. "Knocked the pussy right out of you." Kennedy gave a weird laugh and hacked again. I said I needed to use the bathroom. Down the hall, on the right. The bathroom was as trashed as the living room. The shower drain clogged with thick black hairs. The mirror broken apart. No seat on the toilet. A little altar set atop the tank. A goblet filled with ash. A coil of twine. Bundles of dried plants. And a set of brass knuckles. I texted Tyler and waited. He didn't respond. I got back to the living room and the blunt was in the ashtray and Kennedy was sucking Crazy Bob's face, making weird squealing noises. Chucky paused the game and turned to me. "So you in Kennedy's grade too?" I said I had to go. Kennedy pulled her face away. "I'll see you in school." "I came with you." "It's not that far away. You figure it out." She started cackling. "Whoa, have you seen yourself?" She sank into the couch, catatonic. It was an hour's walk home. Night came down hard, shaking the tree branches. A fox with something in its mouth trotted to the center of the road, looked at me, and trod down the other side into the deeper woods. I texted Tyler again. Lou. 2 men and their son found a nest of dead cats out in Bayers Ridge Conservation. At least 20 ragged, falling apart kitty bodies laid in a circle, covered in papery gray flecks. There'd been a fire in the center. The embers were still dying when they'd found it. Amir. Tyler would get all quiet and say, "or whatever," and we'd go back to talking about anime and ghost stories. It was ugly seeing him like that. So when he got a text and said Jill was coming over, it was as good a reason as any to book out of there. Jill. I told Tyler about Kennedy and Crazy Bob. He said I shouldn't worry about it, and that it didn't really matter. "Go on upstairs," he said. "I have to leak." I went up to his room. Something had changed. He'd cleared off the top of his desk and arranged several objects. A mug filled with ash, a coil of twine, 3 bundles of dried plants, his box cutter. Fingers and palms slipped around my belly. "Don't look at that," Tyler whispered, kissing my neck. He put on some music and pulled me away to his bed. A beat wheezed through the dime-sized laptop speakers, a rapper mumbling, "Bitch, I'ma choose the dirty over you. You know that I ain't scared to lose ya." He stripped, fresh cuts on his arms, belly, chest, and thighs, curls and spirals and V's stacked on top of each other, tight sets of lines, like barcodes or cage bars. My eyes ached looking over them. I was on my period, but he didn't seem to care. He felt good inside me, easing my cramps. My head thrown back and eyes closed, so I wouldn't have to look at his dark uterine scabs. I could still feel crust scraping against my thighs and pelvis, coming
undone by her sweat and letting blood onto my skin. Then he pulled out. I felt cloth pressed against my crotch. I opened my eyes and looked down. He soaked up my blood with the yellow bandana. "What?" I said, still gasping. "Just cleaning up." Eyes empty and a blank face. He folded up the bandana, tuckered it under the bed, and climbed back on top of me, thrusting until he finished, a rotten egg bursting inside me, and I almost did. Amir. After like a month, he went back to normal, or maybe I just forgot what he'd been like before. Lou. A woman said a giant moth killed her pig. She posted pictures online of the papery gray flecks it left behind. She walked in front of a train later that week. She didn't leave a note.